Hi everyone. So I'm getting ready to teach you how to do all of the analyses that you need for computer assignment number 3. And I want to point out that I'm going to be starting with the file that exists after the edits that I made from doing the in-class portion of assignment number 2. If you've been making changes all along the way and saving the changes, then you can just pick up with the file that you've been using. But if you want to start with this file, that's fine as well. It's available to you through Canvas. So I'm going to open up that file. Let me move this over just a little bit and get us started on working through these problems. So here's the file, which again you'll remember has a data view and a variable view. I'm going to put it over here to the data view just because that's where I like to work from when I'm doing my analyses. And let me look at what we need to do first. So you can read all of this on your own, which basically is telling you how to do the work that's needed for these in-class problems. But I'm going to skip down and get to this point where we're starting to actually work the problems. So you'll notice that it says for questions number 1 through 3, we're only going to be looking at the younger students. This data set has students from 7th to 12th grade, and we're only going to be looking at a portion of them. So hopefully you remember what you might want to do for your first step so that you could only look at these specific students. But what you need to do is you need to come over here to Data, and you need to say Select Cases, because we're going to select the folks that we want to work with. So we hit Select Cases, and then we're going to pick the students depending on if they meet the specifications that they're in these lower grades. Then we're going to click on this If button, and we're going to choose Grade and shoot that in here, and we're going to say we want those students who are in the 7th grade, so if grade is 7, or, and this is the symbol that means or we would also take students who are in the 8th grade, if grade equals 8, or we would take students if they were in the 9th grade. Now you could also, of course, enter that as a range if you wanted to. You could say if students are have a grade equal to 7 or greater, but also less than or equal to 9. So you could write this in a different way if you wanted to. Okay, then I'm going to click Continue. And then you'll notice here that the output is just going to filter out the unselected cases. You always want to leave it on that. If you were to do this, that would be horrible because you would actually delete the data for all of the other participants, and that would be something obviously that might be difficult to recover from. So you'll just leave it on Filter Out the Unselected Cases, and that makes it just a temporary switch. You'll hit Paste. That puts it over into your syntax window that you can save so you can remember what you've done. And then you'll hit Run, and that's going to actually select out those participants. So now when you come back over here, you can see a little line marked through. That means that those are the folks who won't be included because, as you can see over here, they're in the 10th grade or the 12th grade. Okay, so let's see what we're supposed to do next. Okay, the next step that we're supposed to do is we're supposed to see if there are any differences in the amount of TV watched between the different grades. And it tells us that this is a one-way ANOVA, and that's because we have one independent variable, which is grade. And because it has 3 levels, we're not able to use an independent samples t-test. So we have to use an ANOVA. Okay, so to run an ANOVA, we come up here to Analyze. We go to Compare Means, and at the bottom down here is the one-way ANOVA choice. So we'll click on that. And sorry about that, got some old stuff in there. So what we're going to do is we're asked to look at TV as a function of grade. So we come down here until we find TV, and this is where we had earlier changed that variable name to be TV so it's easier to find. We shoot that in here, that's our dependent variable. We're looking for differences in TV, so that's our dependent variable. And we're looking at that as a function of grade. So we're going to shoot grade in here as our factor. Now because we have 3 levels, we'll need a post hoc. So we'll go ahead and hit post hoc, and we'll choose a Tukey since that's what we used by hand in class. And we'll hit Continue. And then we're also always going to want to hit Options and hit Descriptives because we'll want to know the means and standard deviations if any of the groups are different from one another. So we'll hit Continue, then we'll hit Paste, go over to our syntax window, select this ANOVA, hit Run. Okay, now with an ANOVA you get a lot of information, and of course we ask for some of this. So the first thing we get here is the descriptive data that we asked for. So you can see it tells us how many 7th graders we have, the mean and standard deviation, same for 8th, same for 9th, and then it also gives us the total for the total sample. This is the results that we're going to need for our assignment. So we see that it says ANOVA. It looks just like the sums of squares tables that you've done in class. And what you're going to need is you're going to need to write your sentence, you're going to need the degrees of freedom for the numerator, the degrees of freedom for the denominator, the F, and the significance level. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to click Cell Properties, I'm going to highlight those so that I can see them. And you might want to get in the habit of highlighting them like in green when they're significant, just because that's sort of a positive thing. So you can see here that our p-value is less than 0.05. It's actually 0.001. So that means that there is a significant difference in the amount of TV watched as a function of grade. So we would come back over to our assignment and we would type in the appropriate sentence for that. So you can see here I've typed in the sentence that we would use to reflect what we found. There is a significant difference in the amount of TV watched per week as a function of grade. F with 2 and 3063 degrees of freedom equals 6.62. P equals 0.001. You could also write here, or alternatively, you could write here P less than 0.05. That would be fine. I also put this note up here just so that you remember it, and that is that we first selected out the cases we wanted, so we'd only be looking at 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. Now that there was a significant difference, the next thing we need to do is we need to say, okay, which groups are different from which other groups? And this is where we look at the post-hoc tests over here. And so you can see, and this is sometimes hard to read, but what you're going to do is you're going to look at each of these is comparing one of the grades to the whatever other existing grades there are. So in this top one, we're comparing 7th graders to 8th graders. And because there's a star here, that means that 7th graders are significantly different from 8th graders. Next, we compare 7th to 9th graders. There's a star here, so those are different from one another. When we come down to 8th graders, we see that 8th graders are different from 7th graders, which we already knew. But 8th graders and 9th graders are not different from one another. And so, of course, when you look at 9th graders, it's going to say 9th graders aren't different from 8th graders, but they are different from 7th graders. So writing these out in sentence form can be kind of hard, but you just want to explain everything that was significant and then say, that anything else was not significant. So like I said, there are a lot of different ways you can write this, but the way I chose to write it was that 7th graders watch significantly more TV, and then I go up to the descriptive portion of SPSS, which is up here, and I get these values, all right? They watch significantly more TV than 8th graders, and again I go over there to get that value, and 9th graders who are not significantly different from one another. So I'm getting the descriptive values up here, which is why I asked for descriptives. I'm finding out which ones are different from each other down here in the multiple comparison set place, and then I'm just trying to write a sentence that explains everything that I found. Okay, so let's go on to number 2 then. Number 2 says, are there differences in the hours of video games played per week? So now we're looking at a different dependent variable as a function of grade, so it's the same independent variable. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to go to Analyze, Compare Means, One-Way ANOVA. I don't have to reset this whole thing if I don't want to, because I know that I need grade again here for the factor. So I'm just going to shoot out TV, and in its place, I'm going to put videos. Okay. Everything here should have been saved, but I can double check. Yes, there's my post-hoc. Okay. And under Options, there's my descriptive. So I've got everything I need. So I hit Paste. That shoots it into my syntax window. Then I'm going to highlight it here, and I'm going to hit Run. Okay, so this time, when I'm looking at my data, I'm just making sure I'm in the right spot here. I can see it up here. I've got videos by grade, so that's what I'm looking for. So I'll come down here for the ANOVA table. I'm going to double click that so that I can start editing it a little bit. I'm going to highlight degrees of freedom for the numerator, for the denominator. Here's my F value, and here's my significance level. So let's highlight that. And I guess I should have said before I went over here, but if you look at the significance level, you can see that it's greater than 0.05. So this is not significant. Oops. I'm going to make the background red, kind of reddish so I can see it. Hit OK. And so this is a ANOVA that was not significant because P is greater than 0.05, and that makes sense because look how low and small this F value is. So when I come over here, I'm going to then write in what I found. And so here I'll say there is not a significant difference. There is not a significant difference in hours of video games played per week, that's the dependent variable, between the different grades, or as a function of grade, however you want to write that. And then I write this, sorry, I made a little mistake there, F with 2 and 3069 degrees of freedom equals 0.05. That's the value of f. Don't get mixed up there. That's the value of f that I solved for. And p is greater than 0.05. Since p is greater than 0.05, I don't need to do anything else because it was non-significant differences. Okay, so I'm going to let you go on and solve this last one by yourself to make sure that you're understanding how to do these one-way ANOVAs.